What's up guys, MikeCoco back here, bringing you guys a new video on the equipment guide I've been working on. It's finally coming out and just hope you guys enjoy. What I'm going to do is that I'm just going to put a few setups for armor and weapon on Lucida, who will be the testing hero, and I'll put one of these setups as the benchmark. Not that I recommend that setup, but it seems to be the most commonly used setup, and I'll refer everything to that setup. So the benchmark setup we're going to use is the 222 setup, which is 2 Myth 5, 2 Myth 4, and 2 Legendary 5. Now, I'm just going to quickly get this set up really quick. And of course, because Myth 6 and Leg 6 has been introduced, you can obviously replace this by going up one tier. Everything going up one tier. So in fact, it would be 2 Myth 5, 2 Myth 6, and 2 Leg 6. But all of those armor is kind of hard to come by if you're not, a top level player. So this setup still applies. It's just that everything has been dropped down one tier, and this happens a lot in a lot of the other setups as well, because I don't have all the up-to-date gear, but it still reflects that because it's just one tier under. So this is the setup that is used most commonly by most people, I would say. The advantage to this setup is that you get a lot of defense. You get the defense, or actually, no, you get a lot of attack, but you get defense instead of HP. So you get the 2-set bonus for Myth 4, you get the 2-set from Myth 5, and you get the 2-set defense buff. And so your damage comes out to 1.28 million, somewhere around there. That number is slightly inflated because my weapon is at level 15 while everything else is at level 10. So that should probably be around 1.25 or 1.2. I can't do math, that's such a high number, but it's slightly over inflated, so just keep that in mind. Now you get a lot more defense. Your defense is around a 100 to 60 ratio. I personally prefer a 2 to 1 ratio because at certain points defense really doesn't help anymore, such as Explorer. Having that extra defense doesn't really help you tank that much longer. It's the HP that matters. So in those cases, I personally prefer HP over defense, but I do know some people that go with defense over HP, or they try to bring the two as close as possible, so just keep that in mind. So this is the benchmark build, and everything's going to be relative to this setup. Now you don't have to set up these parts specifically. I can switch this to or I can switch this to the Legendary 5 gloves, and switch this to or actually I don't have Myth 5 shoes, or switch this. That it's still a 2-2-2 setup. This also works as well. It just depends on what you think, or what legendary or active skills you want to activate. I personally prefer the helm over the shoes, so that's why I have the Legendary 5 shoes. So that's the first setup. We'll call that setup number 1. Setup number 2 is the 3-2-1 setup. And this is the setup where you have 3 Myth 5 and 2 Myth 4. And actually running out of equipment. So this is a 3-2-1 setup. You have 3 Myth 5, 2 Myth 4, and 1 placeholder. Now, of course, I can replace this with the Era Ring because the Era Ring provides a greater attack bonus, but I don't have a massive Era Ring yet. So you can just ignore this ring. Just pretend it's an Era Ring. It doesn't really matter in this case, because this ring will pretty much be used for all the other setups, just to make it consistent. So this is the all-out damage. You have the bonus from attack from the Myth 5, and you have the bonus from Myth 4, and you get the HP buff from Myth 5. And this setup, again, is all-out offense. You get the 14% bonus. Your damage comes out to, again, it's still at the same 1.28 mil, but instead you're getting HP instead of defense. Remember that the previous build had under 100k, around 95k HP, and this one, and they had around 60k defense. This drops 20k defense, but trades it for more HP. So this is like almost a 110 to 40 ratio. That ratio, personally, I prefer is not that great. Again, I prefer more of a 2 to 1 ratio. But in cases like Explore, having that extra little bit of HP or a little bit of defense won't actually help you survive from round, let's say, 6 to 7. And so at that point, it doesn't matter. You might as well just go all out damage, do as much damage before you die, because in some cases it's just like that. You know you're gonna die, so you might as well just deal as much damage as you can. So this is setup number 2. This is what I would say is the all-out offense build. And again, this can be set up 1 tier higher, so myth 6 here and myth 5 here. And an era or even leg 6 ring doesn't really matter. Now we have another setup, which is the third setup, which is 3 myth 5 and 3 leg 5, or 2 leg 5 and 1 extra. And it just so happens that this ring does in fact complete the bonus. So we're going to switch that, and we're going to switch this off really quickly because we don't want to include that. And just put in any ring. Let's just use this ring. So this is the 3-2-1 setup. You have 3 myth 5, 2 leg 5, and oh no, is it the other way around? Should be 3 leg 5. Sorry, I'm looking at my spreadsheet here because there's actually a lot of setups. So you have this setup. Again, you still have the attack bonus from myth 5, but now you have defense and HP. So this is a bit more of a balanced build. You get defense and HP from the legendary, and you get the attack bonus. Now, as you can see here, the damage is less, specifically because I'm not using the legendary 5 ring. And if I did put that on, because actually now that I think about it, it doesn't really matter. This will not contribute to the bonus because there's no 4 set bonus. You have slightly lower damage. You have 1.215. And again, it's overinflated by a little bit, so just treat that as like 1.15. So your damage is slightly lower, but your defense is now over 60k, almost 70k, and your HP is almost at 110k. So both of your tanking abilities have been increased, and your damage has only dropped a little bit. And this is a build that I would use overall. If you're not focusing on anything specific, it will serve very well all around in any mode. It's a decent build, but there's a build that I prefer better, which is very similar actually. It just takes advantage of the fact that you're using a legendary ring. Instead, we're going to use legendary 5 and 3 myth 5. This setup gets you the same damage because again we don't have any more myth parts, but we do have the 3 set bonus for HP, and as you can see we have the HP at 121 increased because we now don't have to use a legendary 5 chest. We can use a myth 5 chest, which is better overall. So this is the build I prefer. Your damage again is the same. It's basically an improvement over the 3-2-1 setup. So this is setup number 4. Now the first 4 setups I mentioned are quite expensive, especially if you're using everything a tier up. So for the less expensive setups, you can always go with the very obvious 4-2 setup, which is the 4 era setup, and 2 legendary 5. Now of course, because you're not using any mythic here, your damage is going to be significantly lower, but it's also going to be significantly cheaper because era is farmable. It's not exactly easier to get, or it might be a little bit easier to get than myth 6 or legendary 6, but it is farmable in tower. And rank 5 legendary drops fairly easily in bounty hunt, I would say. And so this one's fairly consistent. It's not overinflated. Everything's at level 10, so you get roughly 200,000 less damage, and your stats aren't that great, but it's cheap. You almost have that 2-to-1 ratio right now, and I'm using specifically 2 defense and 2 HP, so it's roughly more or less balanced. And so this is a pretty good cheap setup, but I wouldn't stick with this too long because you're still quite underpowered compared to the other setups previously. You're losing out damage, HP, and defense. So this is something I would recommend with if you don't have enough gear. This is just like a placeholder setup that I would use on, if I get a new legendary hero and I don't have the correct gear yet, I'll just throw this on them and just leave them until I get better gear. So that's that kind of setup. So the next setup is the 3-2-1 again. 3-2-1, 3 myth 5, 2 era, and 1 wild or placeholder. And so again, this setup is very similar to the 3-2-1 legendary 5 setup, which is I believe setup number 3. But instead of 2 legendary 5, you have 2 era. And the purpose of this is because the 2 era allows you to get the HP bonus of 5k without having to use 3 legendary 5 pieces. So here you can see the damage is still the same, 1.21, which is round down to 1.15 because of the inflation. you get over 100k damage or HP and over 50k defense. And the advantage of this setup, instead of using the 3-2-1 or the 3-3 leg 5 and myth 5, is because in case you don't want to use the legendary 5 ring, say you have an era ring, you can't use the 3-3 myth 5 leg 5, so you have to switch to 3-2-1. You can use era to get the HP bonus, because remember, if I switch this to a legendary 5 or any legendary, I'm only getting defense. And personally, I prefer defense over HP, so why not just go with era? And plus with the fact that with era, I can choose the inscriptions I want on these. Well, I believe you can't choose. I think this is HP, or maybe they're both HP. Yeah, they're probably both HP, but you can pick and select the inscriptions you want. So this gives you a bit more versatility than the 3-2-1, and it gives you more HP. So this is kind of like the alternate version of the 3-2-1 setup. And don't worry if you guys are getting lost with all the setups I mentioned. I'm probably very likely gonna list them in a description and probably get like a screenshot of the spreadsheet I have, so it'll make it slightly less confusing. So now comes the next setup. This is a more tanky setup. This is the setup that was used by most people before Myth 5 was introduced, which is a 2-2-2 setup. 2 leg 5, 2 leg 4, and 2 era. And let's see if I can equip it right. Okay, first step I already went wrong. And let's see, we need... Alright, there we go. So we have 2 leg 5, 2 leg 5, 2 leg 4, and 2 era. So this setup I personally don't prefer because, again, it's very biased towards defense. You get all that defense, but your HP is not that great. In fact, they're very close to each other. It's like a 90 to 70 ratio. And your damage is at 1 mil, and you know, it's 200,000 less damage, and your defense, while high, your HP is not that great. And in this setup, I actually don't recommend this setup. Similarly to the 2-2-2 Myth 5, Myth 4 setup, you just get not enough HP. And specifically for this build, the problem is with it is that you get way too much defense. And one thing you have to think about is that a lot of heroes actually provide defense up, but they don't provide a way to increase your HP. Sure, you have Lucas, who can provide a shield, and the shield can kind of act like an HP like barrier, but it's not a true HP. It actually increases your HP. While Ritterin actually does increase defense, and so does who else? Prince Arthur, and I think some other people as well. I'm thinking maybe a few costumes. I might be forgetting them. But overall, HP, in my opinion, is better than defense, so I would not recommend this build. If you want defense, you can definitely go with this build. So if that floats your boat, then go ahead and use it. Now, the next setup is the setup that I would recommend over the 2-2-2 setup, which is the 3-2-1 setup, which still involves using the 2 era, but we're going to replace one of these with a let's see, actually I don't have that. Alright, so this is a 3-2-1 setup. Now this is another setup that I like to use, that I just want to throw on some hero, because it's very balanced. You get the defense bonus, you get the HP bonus, and you get more HP bonus. Now personally, as a fan of HP, I love this one. You get almost 100k HP and 60k defense. Now, this ring doesn't matter, again, it's 4 set, and you lose out on damage, but this is great for anyone that plays a significant tank role, and you don't have the correct gear yet. This is the build I would be going for, and sometimes even with the correct gear, I would still use this build because it's just so damn good. You get so much HP, you get almost, 15k HP and 15k defense. That's tremendous. The only setup that's is better than this in terms of tankiness is I think it's a 3 leg 5 and 3 leg 4 setup, and that's the next one I'm going to cover. So in this case, we're gonna go with 3 myth, or 3 leg 4 actually. Did I say myth? I meant leg. And let's see. Not all of the gear is readily available. Okay, here we go. Look at this. It's 113k HP. Roughly 70k defense, almost at that 2-to-1 ratio. Damage is still the same. This is in my opinion, the best tank build. before I said that the 3-2-1 is the best for offense. This is your tanking forever. You get all the HP you could want, get all the defense you could want. And again, it can be raised up one tier, and this, I believe, is the build with the most HP and defense. There's nothing that surpasses this as of now. And so I'm running this on pretty much any tank that needs to survive. Anyone that's, high rank, high level, already maxed out, just need to focus on tanking. I personally use this on Ritterin, and I have the other tank setup, which was, I think I said 3-2-1 setup on Nikki as well, because sometimes the only problem with this setup and a lot of the 3-3 setups is that it forces you to use a specific ring. And personally, if you have rings that are very high active, for example, I think Nikki has like a level 10 heal ring, so like I wouldn't give that up for just a bit more HP. I always want this to go because it's almost like a free heal. So in those cases, I would stick with a 3-2-1 leg 5 and 3 leg 5 plus 2 era plus the 1 wild / placeholder ring, because it gives me more versatility, but I still get that very great defensive build. So that's one, the two I recommend for defense. And then we have a 3 leg 5 and 2 myth 4 and another placeholder setup. Now this is the kind of like the knockoff version of the earlier setup number 3 that I mentioned, because instead of myth 5 you're going to be using myth 4, and what will happen is, let's see if I can get this right. What was it? 3 leg 5 and 2 myth 4. 3 leg 5. Alright, so wait, no, that's not it. Here. So the purpose of this is, again, more of a bounce build, but this is a cheaper version. You get the attack bonus, which is 2% less than myth 5, but it's still an attack bonus regardless. You get the defense and HP, and you get the versatility of choosing whatever ring you want. Now, again, you have over 50k defense, which is nice, and almost 110k HP, which is close to that 2-to-1 ratio. Your damage is slightly less because you're not using a mythic weapon, so that's the only problem with this. And so I would recommend this pretty much if you're short on money, or not money, but short on gear, because using a myth 5 is superior because you can just switch this weapon out for myth 5, which is superior to a legendary 5. So this is the cheap build, but I would replace this ASAP with the better version, which is replacing this with the two myth 5 pieces. And I think that is the last setup. And what I'm gonna say right now is that because myth 4 is actually unattainable for now, I can show you guys why. Because Sage Benalis can only accept level 2 and level 1 medals, but we're not getting any level 1 medals anymore for mythic raid. So I would really be careful of upgrading anything, because if you want to somehow get to a specific combo and you need rank 4 or myth 4, you don't want to reinforce it to myth or to rank 5, because as far as I know, there's no way we can get this anymore unless they introduce some kind of exchange feature where we replace one level 1 myth medal for, or two, you get 2 level 1 myth medals for every level 1 myth medal, or level 2 myth medal. So it's kind of like exchange feature. Unless we get that feature, this is going to be gone. No one's going to have this anymore, so it's actually going to be kind of rare. Not in a good sense though, because rank 5 is still better, obviously. Once you get myth 6, you're just going to be using myth 5 and myth 6 rather than myth 4 and myth 5. So that's how it's going to work. So I think, to recap, I already forgot all the setups I mentioned, so I'm just going to go through them very quickly. So, defense setup. This is the defense setup that I would use. Any sort of 3 leg 5, 3 leg 4, or 3 leg 5 / 3 leg 6 if you have that kind of gear. This gets you defense and HP, but the con to this is that you don't get to choose a ring, which is slightly detrimental if you have a very good ring. Now, if you do have a very good ring, there is an alternative. You get slightly less HP, but you do get the ability to use your ring, which is the 3-2-1 setup. And you use 3 leg 5, 2 era, and whatever ring you choose, like this ring. Level 7 active, I want to use it, let's go. Okay, you can use this ring or this setup for versatility purposes, so I would go with that. Offensive setup, I would go with either the 3 myth 5 and 3 leg 5, which is this. And let's quickly equip this. We should have one feature I think they should add is oh no, what am I doing? It's equipment, like equipment setups. You know how we have for auto setups for formation? We should get that for equipment. So this is the setup I was talking about. This is a fairly balanced setup. You get attack, you get HP, you get the defense and HP from this. So this is the setup. Again, not that versatile because you're locked kind of to that ring. But then, of course, you can go with, you know, 2 arrow instead, or maybe, let's see what I have here on my spreadsheet. You can probably go with, instead, a 3 leg 5, as in something like this. And that way, you still get your attack bonus. You lose out on the HP bonus, but you would replace it with the HP bonus from your leg 5. And this ring can be whatever ring you want it to be. So that's an ulterior setup. Alternative? Is that even a word? Alternative setup. And so that's basically it. Those are the 2 setups I would recommend. The last one I wouldn't recommend too much because it's very heavily offensive based. But it's basically 3 myth 5 and 2 myth 4. Or you can reverse it as 3 myth 4 and 2 myth 5, depending on whichever one is easier for you to get. This one goes all out offense, you get all the damage you could want, but you're very vulnerable to attacks. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the equipment guide. I believe we're going to be getting mythic rings soon, so I will try my best to keep this thing updated. I don't know what to call it because the problem that I didn't want to make the guide in the first place was that it always be updated. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Peace. Hey guys, MikeCoco back here. Just to add a really quick note, this video is meant to be a cost-effective / resource-efficient video, so I won't be considering inscription levels past 10 and probably even past level 15, except for the gun and the helmet that I reinforced by accident. Because at that point it's just unfeasible for, I would say, pretty much all free-to-players and even some people who buy stuff in-game, because reinforcing it past level 15 is just a huge amount of resources wasted, in my opinion, because it's very resource intensive. So I won't be considering that. And another thing is that I won't be considering full sets. The reason is full sets are very expensive because they're hard to obtain, and to use a full set you need 5 pieces, and with the other setups, the mixed setups that I mentioned, you can possibly gear 2 heroes with those 5 pieces instead of just gearing 1. But I will say that a full set is better than any of the mixed sets that I mentioned. For example, Lasita right now, with the full Legendary 5, she deals the same 1.28 million, but her HP and defense is higher than any of the other setups that I mentioned, while still retaining the attack bonus. So that's just an example of how the full set is better, but it requires you to have 5 pieces. Similarly, if you have 5 times Myth 5 and then a massive arrow or a legendary ring, you know, it's hard to obtain. Not everyone can get that, so that's why I'm not considering full sets. If you do have full sets lying around, you might as well use them because they are in fact better than any mixed set. But for the value effective, I guess you would say, mixed sets are the way to go. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Peace.